There is something spreading across the surface of your terracotta pots right now, and your instinct is almost certainly to remove it. You can see it from here, a flat green film where the clay has taken on moisture, gray-green and dusty on the shadowed side, almost powdery in places, forming across the terracotta a layer that looks like the opposite of a well-kept garden. If you have already scraped some of it away with a fingernail or a stiff brush, it comes off in thin, papery flakes, and whatever is underneath looks clean, the way the pot should look. Like you have done something right. You have not. What you are looking at, that entire layered, living community of color and crust, is one of the most productive ecosystems in your entire garden. It has been building for years. The organisms inside it have been doing what they do for longer than flowering plants have existed on this planet. And what this community is doing right now on the surface of your pots is something that no fertilizer and no fungicide you can buy can replicate. In part because one of the animals living inside it has been hunting the organisms responsible for plant disease for 400 million years. Before you fill that bucket, you need to understand what is actually there. The green, slick outer film, the layer that appears first on new terracotta when moisture is consistent, is algae, often mixed with cyanobacteria, which are among the oldest photosynthetic organisms on Earth. Where the surface has been colonized for longer, the community changes. The growth becomes flatter, drier, more tightly bound to the clay, chalky in places, almost leathery in others, sometimes pale yellow or ash gray at the margins. What you are looking at there is lichen, and lichen is not what most people imagine. It is not a moss. It is not a surface mold. Lichen is a composite organism, a fungus and a photosynthetic partner, either algae or cyanobacteria or sometimes both, living in such complete biological integration that they function as a single entity. Scientists do not classify lichen as a species, but as an ecological relationship. That relationship has existed in the fossil record for an estimated 400 million years, long before the first flowering plant, long before most of the life that now fills your garden had any reason to exist. Let that settle for a moment. Most people, seeing this growth on a pot, assume it signals something wrong, that the accumulation is harmful to the plant inside, that it is rotting the clay or interfering with drainage. It is not. Lichen anchors to the clay surface but does not penetrate it the way destructive mold does. The pot does not degrade. The plant inside is unaffected by what colonizes the exterior wall. What the lichen actually does is seal the outermost pores of the terracotta with a thin biological layer that moderates moisture loss through the wall, slowing evaporation during warm weather and providing the roots a slightly more stable moisture environment than bare clay can offer. It is not a contaminant. But what is living within its community is something you need to understand. Where algae and lichen have established themselves on a pot, moisture lingers on the surface long enough for a third layer to develop, a thin coat of moss, sometimes barely visible, collecting along the base and across the cooler, shadowed face. And within that moss, in numbers that would genuinely surprise you, there is an animal that most gardeners have never noticed or thought to name. Springtails, columbola, are among the most abundant arthropods on the planet. There may be hundreds of thousands of them in a single square meter of healthy growing medium. They range from 1 to 3 millimeters in length, which means you would need to look closely to see them at all, and they have been present in terrestrial ecosystems for approximately 400 million years. They are not pests. They cannot bite you or harm your plants. What they can do is hunt. A springtail moves through the biological film on your pot surface in constant methodical search. When she finds a colony of Pythium, the pathogen responsible for root rot, the organism that collapses seedlings overnight and dissolves healthy root systems with no visible warning from above, she consumes it. She moves through Fusarium the same way. She locates botrytis spores before they reach the soil surface and eats those too. She does not stop. She covers the pot rim, the lower exterior wall, the surface of the moss, and the uppermost layer of the potting medium, completely invisible, completely continuous, and entirely without cost. Research published in the journal Phytobiologia has confirmed that many springtail species preferentially select pathogenic fungal strains over beneficial ones. They are not eating indiscriminately, but targeting the specific organisms that kill container plants. The pot of basil you replaced twice last summer may have been saved by what you scrubbed off in spring. Think about that. The damping off that took your seedlings before they reached 2 weeks old, the root rot that arrived with no warning from above. The pathogen responsible was present on the surface of your pot before it ever reached the soil. If the community on that exterior wall had been intact, undisturbed, something invisible was working against exactly that. It is not a dirty pot. It is a defense system. And you have been scrubbing it away. No spray reaches those surfaces as consistently as she does. No fungicide hunts as specifically, as continuously, or as responsively as she does, moving where the threat moves, feeding where the spores accumulate, never requiring replenishment and never taking a day off. What she provides has no direct commercial equivalent. The cyanobacteria in the surface film are doing something else entirely, and at no cost to you. Certain species within this group fix atmospheric nitrogen, pulling it directly from the air and converting it into a form that can enter the surrounding soil as water moves across the pot's surface. In small amounts, slowly, consistently, over years. A form of quiet, gradual fertility with no bottle equivalent and no application schedule happening on the exterior of your pots, whether you were aware of it or not. There is also a dimension to this community that reaches beyond the pot itself. Lichen are among the most reliable bioindicators in existence, acutely sensitive to air pollution. Sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides disrupt the symbiosis between the fungal and photosynthetic partners, and in areas with significantly degraded air quality, lichen cannot establish at all. The presence of this community on your garden pots, growing thickly and with visible variety, is a passive record of the air your household breathes every day. What you have been treating as evidence of neglect is in fact evidence of something cleaner than that. So here is what this means in practice. When you clean pots between plantings, rinse the interior, remove old soil, clear the drainage hole, and leave the outer surface entirely alone. The community visible there took years to establish. In some pots, a thin gray crust represents a decade or more of slow biological succession, each layer enabling the next. To scrub it away is to start over from bare clay. If you have pots that are still bare and you want this kind of community to develop, place them somewhere morning dew settles on the surface and partial shade keeps them consistently moist, then leave them completely undisturbed. The colonization will come. No inoculant, no treatment, no schedule. This system has been finding porous surfaces and building on them for 400 million years. It does not need your help. It only needs you to stop removing it. What is on your pots is not clutter. It is not neglect. It is accumulated biological structure built layer by layer across years, quietly working on behalf of the plants you are trying to grow. Leave it there. If you have a terracotta pot that has been developing this kind of community for years, the older and more colonized the better, I would genuinely like to hear about it in the comments. Where it lives in your garden, how long you have had it, what the growth looks like. I read every single one. And if you want to follow the same thread to understand another creature